possesses weapons in the Middle East, and Obama started stammering and looking at his shoes. I mean, she asked it. It was his first question. That is the question. It's still the question, and they have to answer it.
And now the GAO, for people not familiar, that's the General Accounting Office. I guess they call it the General Accountability Office now. And it's basically the auditing house of the Congress. They work directly for the Congress, not under the executive branch. And, a lot of what they do is very flawed, but then again, they're probably, as far as institutionally speaking, especially now that there's no more independent counsel statute or anything, they're the closest thing to any kind of real inspector general or internal affairs type, check and balance inside this government. They're the last place where Congress can actually check the executive, basically. And so here the subject is a GAO report from 1978 that's been kept secret this whole time. And so now take us through this report. What all did you learn in this thing, Grant?
Yeah, and just getting back to that, the GAO originally wanted this report to be public, but basically the Congress was getting a lot of heat from the public, such that the chairman of the Energy Committee, Representative John Dingell, finally, he responded, and he told the GAO they wanted a complete report on an incident that happened in the early 60s at the Nuclear Materials and Equipment Company in Pennsylvania. There were 4 theories about something bad that had happened at the plant, and so they chartered the GAO to do an investigation into what actually happened. And there were 4 key theories, but basically the Israelis had obtained weapons-grade uranium in coordination with NUMEC's management for diversion to the Israeli nuclear weapons program. But the GAO was also looking into the possibilities that not only was the CIA involved, but that also whether or not the FBI or other elements of the U.S. government had engaged in a cover-up of the incident, because, basically 11 and 12 years had passed, and nothing was going on. There was not a peep from the administration about the problem. And so basically they went into this long investigation in which they found many curious things. But the most curious thing they found was that although the FBI was on to NUMEC early on, after following around Zalman Shapiro, the head of the president of the plant, and others for a while, they made a recommendation that the entire plant stop receiving uranium. The FBI recommended that NUMEC's operating license be taken away, etc. And when they were told no, the FBI walked away from the investigation between 1969 and 1976. So basically, the report's really critical of the FBI, but they're most critical about the fact that the FBI didn't investigate diversion of uranium from the beginning, as they were required to do under some laws in place at that time. Well, basically what you have is this huge gap in time where the official government line was that they didn't think there had been any diversion. And then along comes Gerald Ford, stumbling into office, probably not having been briefed on any of the skeletons in the closet of the Johnson and Nixon administration, who directly orders the FBI and Department of Justice to address the diversion aspect. Those are his words. And suddenly the investigation is back on. And suddenly U.S. government officials are changing their positions on NUMEC and saying suddenly they're reconsidering whether or not there had been a diversion of weapons-grade uranium to Israel. And the GAO then goes on to document all of the flaws of subsequent investigations, the fact that the government wasn't even really tracking any of the tons and tons of weapons-grade uranium going into NUMEC and the smaller amounts coming back out, finding that NUMEC was hiring away DOE employees who were inspecting, or AEC employees who were inspecting in a bid to kind of show that they were good guys and that they were tracking the uranium. They also mention the fact that Shapiro had friends in high places that allowed him to maintain his security clearances and continue to get sensitive jobs across the government, even if despite the scandal. But at the end of the line, the GAO report doesn't actually say what happened to the uranium. They simply say that there doesn't appear, most in particular on the part of the CIA, to have really been any interest in resolving the NUMEC matter. That they seem to, at the very top, have been privy to feelings that this shouldn't be thoroughly investigated, and so they basically didn't do a very good job. And that's the end of the new report from the GAO standpoint. Subsequent to this report, of course, we've gotten a lot more information about spies who are visiting NUMEC. There have been some books coming out like Gideon's Spies, which talk about Raphael Eaton, stealing uranium at the plant. So what it does do is it fills in sort of, what must have been going on at the top of the agencies designated with enforcing U.S. laws that caused them not to take any action on this issue, which is the big deal about this report.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that you quote out of the report is the GAO investigators' speculation that perhaps this whole thing was some kind of covert op, and that at the highest levels of the U.S. government there was permission granted. Is there any indication that there's some kind of presidential finding authorizing this or something?
Well, if there is a presidential finding that authorizes the theft of taxpayer-funded weapons-grade uranium from NUMEC and indicates that the CIA should facilitate that by all means possible, haven't seen it yet. It seems because...
Would that be required, do you think? I mean, could it be, if we're talking about, I don't know, Johnson or Nixon or whatever, yeah, go ahead and let them have some. I mean, does it have to be written on paper like that in somebody's safe somewhere?
Oh, who knows? But I tend to think the following probably happened. This investigation was really shut down during the Johnson administration. And Johnson was basically so dependent on Abraham Feinberg and the good graces of the Israel lobby to finance his campaign. I would tend to think that when J. Edgar Hoover or Nicholas Katzenbach came into his office, and both of these people had been utterly beat up by the lobby. J. Edgar Hoover had been slapped around by some Jewish agency people who were covering for the conventional arms smuggling. Katzenbach had lost a big effort to register the American Zionist Council as a foreign agent. So they come into office humbled. I can just see Johnson maybe saying or indicating by rolling his eyes, this is not going to be a big investigation priority for me, because he already told some of his staff, when a defense Secretary Clark Clifford came in and phoned him and it said, quote, "Mr. President, I don't want to live in a world where the Israelis have nuclear weapons," unquote. Johnson just said, "Don't bother me with this anymore." So if he was saying, "Don't bother me with this anymore," to his law enforcement people, I would tend to think that accounts for the big